Kia koe e te whaia, mema o te hapori Climate Action Forum, e te mi kia koutou katoa. Nō reira e te whānau, look, I love that kombucha. I think that's what's really, really lovely. So thank you very much. I don't usually drink it, but I thought I'll try both of them tonight. And it's a bit like Dangona, if you know what that is. Nō reira, e te mi koutou katoa, enjoy your evening and enjoy the beautiful film that we're going about to see. And take this knowledge back to our young people, because I'm afraid I'm getting to that generation now where I'm going to rely on my mukupuna to be able to carry out this action. And we've got lots of lovely Pākeke here in our audience. I was going to say congregation, but in our audience. And please do. They say he ata me nui o te ao māku e ki atu e tangata, e tangata, e tangata. I want to say, because we were with the Student Climate Action Group on Friday, and it was wonderful to see all those young students advocating for what we should have done something about in our lifetime, and it's taken a bit too long, and I'm not going to be there long enough to be able to see it right through. But I want to put that another way. He ata me nui o te ao māku e ki atu e mukapuna, e mukapuna. Nō reira e te mihi koutou katoa, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
We couldn't have asked for a more wonderful opening of our evening. Kia ora koutou, ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa. Ko Joanna Santa Barbara tōku ingoa. I'm Joanna Santa Barbara, co-chair of the Nelson Tasman Climate Forum. My fellow co-chair is the wonderful Harvey Ruru. So welcome, a great welcome to you. It's wonderful to have you all here at the start of Climate Action Week and the premiere screening of Ben and Beartha, a community compost love story. The Nelson Tasman Climate Forum is a community-led initiative weaving our communities together for urgent strategic climate action. This is our second year running Climate Action Week, and we're very grateful for a huge amount of support for the 30 events that we have in Climate Action Week. So we want to thank volunteers, businesses, organisations, and both Nelson and Tasman councils. There are a number of action-oriented activities and learning opportunities scheduled from now until next Sunday, June the 4th. And do pick up a schedule of events to see what interests you. And register for them on the Nelson Tasman Climate Forum website. So, Ben and Beartha, a community compost love story. It shares the story of our local community member, Ben Bushell, and the collective climate action of our local community. Composting food scraps may seem like a small and insignificant part of all that we do, but it's actually a crucial solution to addressing climate change, reducing waste, and creating a regenerative and resilient food system. The film highlights themes like collective action, connection, and the power of working towards a common goal, all of which are central to community climate action and to resilience. Our evening will be guided by Nelson City Council Councillor Rachel Sanson, who I'm happy to say is a good friend. Rachel is an internationally successful businesswoman and entrepreneur with 20 years governance and management experience in the private, public and not-for-profit sectors. Rachel co-founded and ran a multi-million-dollar youth-focused global education and leadership development company. She's an Edmund Hillary Fellow, a chartered member of the Institute of Directors, a resource management commissioner, a member of Nelson Tasman Chamber of Commerce, and a signatory of the Nelson Tasman Climate Action Charter, and an intergenerational climate ambassador. Rachel, it's our pleasure to invite you tonight to lead us in this evening. Thank you.
Tēnā kōrua o tātou rangatira e Harvey, matua Harvey, me whae Joanna. Nā mihi mō tō kōrua, kōrero, tautoko. Tēnā koutou, nau mai haere mai, whakatau mai rana. I'm Rachel Sanson, good evening everyone, and I am so excited and delighted to welcome you this evening, all the compost lovers and the compost curious, as part of Nelson Tasman Climate Forum Action Week, to support and celebrate the world launch of this amazing film, Ben Beartha. I ask you to join me in celebrating this movement that community compost has become, to acknowledge and applaud Ben, Antoinette and Jordan, and all the people who are part of this story and have brought it to life. And to encourage all of us to keep the critical momentum and focus on urgent climate action. Shortly, we'll be welcoming Mayor Tim King to the stage to launch Climate Action Week. We'll then be showing the film. It's about 40 minutes. This will be followed by about a 35-minute Q&A panel with the filmmakers Antoinette Wilson and Jordan Osmond. I can't see them actually, but I'm sure they're in the room somewhere. Yep, okay, great. The founder of Community Compost, Ben Bushell, and waste minimisation advocate and expert, Karen Driver. Finally, there will be a chance to chat and catch up with everyone following the main event. So, Mayor Tim King, I'd like to welcome you. He was a Tasman District Councillor for 21 years, including 18 years as Deputy Mayor, before becoming Mayor in 2019, and then again in 2022. Tim is also a farmer. He is deeply connected to the land in this area, and I was guessing he's a huge fan of compost, but I got to have a chat to him before we started, and they have a circular composting system at their place which involves pigs and chickens, and so he's composted by default, but I think he's a pretty big fan. Welcome.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Tim King taka wingawa, kora mātua o Koni Hera o te tai ao really. Thanks very much for the welcome. Thanks Rachel for the introduction. Yeah, that was slightly awkward when you asked me about composting. And I did also not see any pork or chicken out there, and I was thinking, crikey, what do I say? But I am a fairly committed carnivore. And like, as a farmer, I think the key thing is that the thing that horrifies me is the waste. Waste and food, I guess I take it quite personally. I know how bloody hard you have to work to produce food, and whatever that food is, whether that's meat, whether that's dairy, whether that's vegetables, whether that's whatever it is, the people who grow it produce it, whether that's for themselves or for other people, it is bloody hard work. And it's an absolute disgrace that a huge percentage of all the food that's produced in the world in any given year gets wasted. A significant proportion before it even arrives at the market. Another significant proportion thrown out because it goes past its use by date or it's deemed to be unsaleable, and then another very significant chunk once we take it home and we don't utilise it all, and then we end up binning it. The combination of all those things means that we produce in the world far more food than we actually need. Despite that, there are people who don't get enough. And I think it is one of the things, so I'm going slightly off topic here, but it is an absolute tragedy. I take it personally when I spend a lot of my time trying to produce food, both for ourselves and for the wider community, and it really guts me when I see how much of it gets wasted. Having said that, I'll try and get back on topic. Really appreciate the opportunity to come along and open Climate Action Week. I did pull out the schedule, and I thought I'll go through a couple of these things on this side of it, and then I realised I actually can't read that because it's really, really small. But there are clearly a huge range of activities being offered this week. There is some bigger stuff on here. I'll get back to that at the end, so don't worry. There are a huge range of activities being offered this week, and as was touched on earlier, a lot of that is by volunteers. And volunteers right around our community in all sorts of ways, shapes and forms are what makes our community such an awesome place. And in this topic discussion debate, our collective efforts, community is really the answer to all of this. Our collective efforts are absolutely key in going to address our climate change and trying to build a sustainable future for us, our families, my kids, your kids. And in many ways it's the messages and the views and the actions of groups of volunteers, people like the Climate Forum, businesses getting out there and just providing opportunities for people to make change that have far more impact than top-down, centrally led, whether it's central government or local government, telling people do this or do that. I don't really understand why. No, I do really. People do tend to be somewhat sceptical of governments and councils. And I think messages that come from their peers and from communities are often far better taken on board. It may take slightly longer, it may take time, but I think you get a much more sustainable outcome. I'll touch on some of the things that we're doing as a council. So Tasman's draft climate response strategy and action plan is a comprehensive roadmap that outlines our commitment to reducing emissions and enhancing resilience in Tasman District. And I'd really like to thank the feedback that the forum members have provided into our draft plan, and hopefully that input will be reflected and we can get on with delivering the outcomes. This revised version will serve as a supporting document to our next long-term plan, consultation on which starts in March 2024. As I said, community engagement and participation are vital parts of this success. There is a huge challenge in this whole discussion, and that is human nature. We just have always and will, for as far as I can imagine, tend to focus on the immediate, the threats that are tomorrow, next week. It is very hard to get people to focus on whatever the issue is that's long term. And even more difficult when it's a really, really big problem, because we're like hardwired to run away from big problems. Have been forever, something that you can't kill or eat. If it's going to kill or eat you, you just run the other way. So that is hardwired into us, and when you confront people with a big problem that potentially can eat them, their first instinct is to just run the other way, go and hide. And it is hard to get over, and it is going to require a lot of little things to come together to make change. We face a unique challenge in our region. 58,000 residents spread across a vast 9,500 square kilometres, 17 settlements and only 23,000 ratepayers to fund the actions that we need to take, not just in this space, but across everything that we're responsible for delivering. The financial realities mean that we have to be careful with our planning and how we allocate resources. We do have a big focus on adaptation and resilience. And I firmly believe that the way to get people to realise how important it is to do their emissions reduction, to try and make those little changes in their daily lives, is to confront them with the sheer cost of what the alternative looks like. Because yes, there are options, and whether that's managed retreat, and I was just having a discussion with Joanna before about, that's not a great word, because it buys straight into the whole running away from the problem thing. We've lost, we're retreating. It's not a great message. So maybe we're better to talk about community-led resettlement or relocation. But it's still going to be very difficult to do, and it's horrendously expensive, as is trying to defend the space that we currently reside in. but don't underestimate people's attachment to their place where they live, where they've grown up, in many cases for generations. And we're dealing with a lot of coastal communities, particularly communities that are occupied by iwi. They are deeply rooted in that space. The idea of moving away from it is way more challenging than I think a lot of people have given credit for. I'm really pleased to report that we have made significant strides in implementing our Climate Action Plan, the first version. Most of our short-term actions have been achieved, and we're on track to meet most of the medium-term ones. We've adopted a walking and cycling strategy, secured significant government funding to implement it, but again, not without its challenges. When you move from theory to practice, the idea of cycleways, which get great ticks when you put out a consultation document and people go, oh yeah, no, I love cycleways, awesome, how good. And then you go to put one outside their place and take away their car parks. Oh shit, no, I don't like cycleways. Well, I do like cycleways, but did you put it over there? Outside someone else's house? Outside someone else's business? So none of these things are easy, and you get the buy-in at a high level, but when you come to implement it, it's never quite as simple as it seems. Hopefully, public transport will be slightly easier, although I have had a couple of places where people really don't like where the bus stops are. It's like, crikey, you know, of all the things, the bus stop. Put it outside someone else's house, outside someone else's business. It's a bit tricky. But I'm really looking forward to the extension of the public transport service out to the communities of Wakefield and Brightwater and Motueka, Mapua, Tasman, and with electric buses, which will be one of the first public transport services in the country that has largely electric buses. And with that extension, hopefully, again, it'll take time for patronage to pick up. But I think it will, and as people get to use it, and hopefully as people use it, it will become more frequent, and hopefully it'll be a bit of a virtuous circle. But it is going to be challenging to start with. Over the past 2 years, we've planted around 85,000 trees, with many projects that have been funded by Jobs for Nature. Interestingly, again, Jobs for Nature funding going to come to an end. So where is that going to be picked up from? Again, the same challenge: small communities, limited resources. Where do you prioritise? And as some of that big funding that's come from central government disappears, how do we fill those gaps? The Waimea Delta Ecological Restoration Project, creating space for the estuary edge to migrate inland as sea levels rise, enabling and hopefully supporting the preservation of those precious coastal ecosystems. Installed the flare at the East Valley landfill to burn off the methane gas. Ironically, despite the fact it's actually genuinely destroying a greenhouse gas, you don't get to count it because it's a closed landfill. So apparently the methane from that one didn't really count in the first place. So some of these things and a lot of the accounting that goes into these conversations, again, I think a lot of people kind of switch off because it all sounds really complicated and complex and difficult. And people go, oh, so you're measuring it and it's down by last this, and how do you measure it? You can't really explain it. Doesn't really help. So again, coming back to something that was said earlier, lots of little things, lots of little actions that people can take that don't require accounting treatments, that don't require explanation, that don't require huge amounts of money, is where we're probably in the long run going to get our best bang for buck. In collaboration with Nelson City Council and the Climate Forum, we're working on the first community greenhouse gas emission inventory for the Tasman District. Our commitment to coastal management and response to climate change remains a key area for us to progress. We have a huge coastline in the Tasman region. So the Coastal Management Responding to Climate Change project. Central government legislation is coming, but again, it takes an interminable amount of time to get through. The replacement for the RMA is anticipated to take 10 years to implement. The Climate Adaptation Act is not yet even out in draft form. You would think it might have been one of the earlier acts that they looked to put through the parliamentary system, but apparently not. I have the good fortune to be involved in a working party in Wellington, and one of the things that it does highlight is just how many moral hazards there are in this space. The incentives and disincentives, the messages you send, the implications on those who may not be able to pay or afford, to either move or adapt or defend. And how do you do that? We spend an unfathomable amount of money, as we are right at the moment as a country, on response to disasters. And if we continue to send the message that we'll spend an inordinate amount of money when there is a disaster, but we don't actually spend that much in preparing or avoiding a disaster, people will always just wait for the disaster. It's like, well, that's when the government comes and helps. So there has to be a shift in mindset in when we fund things and how. In closing, I just want to reiterate that the path to a sustainable future does require our collective efforts. There is no single decision maker, no entity that can snap their fingers, whether that's internationally, nationally or locally, and just make this all happen easier. It's bloody hard work, like pretty much everything else in our day-to-day lives. And there tends to be a focus, as I said earlier, on the cost of living, or the response to natural disasters. And just as you think there's not the next thing that's going to destroy us all, AI turns up. And suddenly there's hearings in the Senate in America on what do we do about AI? So we haven't solved the climate issue yet, but we're moving right on. So this, I guess, highlights just how difficult it is and how important it is for grassroots, people who get out every day, get out with that voluntarily, and just assist, help and provide options for people to take up. And over time, I know it's never fast enough, but I think over time, our community and communities around the country and around the world will get there. So thank you very much for the opportunity to come and speak. Really hope you get out and enjoy some of these activities, from Electric Kiwis, test drive an electric bike or car, Rally for Change, All Hands to the Soil, obviously tonight's composting movie, Repair and Mend, another great thing, and the Climate School. Make the most of the week. I hope you have a really enjoyable evening. My apologies, I am now going to exit and go home and enjoy a bit of family time. And I hope you have a fantastic week. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.